The Veteran's Voice, stories that deserve to be heard, is proudly sponsored by Calling Gilbert, Wright & Carter.
My name is Tommy Boroughs. I served in the United States Marine Corps. My top rank was captain, and for a while my squadron served in Vietnam, supporting ground troops. And this is my story. When I was 11 years old, I had a paper route. This was 1950. Every morning, before I did anything else, I'd cut the wire off my paper and I would sit under a light pole and I would read what was going on in Vietnam. I would read about what happened that day and where the lines got moved and how the Marines are doing especially. And I remember, going through when the North Vietnamese came in, and then we had to retreat back. And Frozen Chosin, if you remember that, the Marines had to retreat through the Chosin Reservoir, and they call it Frozen Chosin. Well, it's tough to get through this. But I decided that I wanted to be among those that did that, okay? And I was 11 years old, but I decided that that's what I wanted to do. So I didn't take NOTC in college. I went to Marine OCS, after college. But only in that, I got sort of excited in flying jets, and I decided I wanted to go to flight school. Took the test, did well on everything except my eyes. I had a couple of stigmatisms that wouldn't take me. So out of basic school, that's where the Marine Corps sends all its new second lieutenants before they'll trust them to do anything. I got assigned to. I got into aviation. I got assigned to the back seat of the F-4 Phantom II. The F-4 and the F-4 Phantom II and the F-14 were primarily designed put people in the back seat primarily for air-to-air missions, but in Vietnam they used us just for air support. So basically what we did was we dropped bombs, fired rockets, used napalm in support of the troops on the ground, flew out of Da Nang. My squadron was the first Marine fixed wing into combat in Vietnam, and the first one out. So I was in '65, got out earlier, just didn't serve a full tour of duty because we were sent there toward the end of a 13-month tour overseas. When I came back, there were no real protesters, but as the war went on, there were a lot of protesters protesting actually the soldiers as they came back. So even to the point where they didn't wear their uniforms when they came back. And then you read and hear about folks getting, veterans getting spit on. I mean, just treated with awful respect when they were just doing their job. A lot of them were drafted, had no choice about what to do, whether to go and fight a war or not. And this was not a war that they chose to fight. This was a war that our country chose to fight. So right or wrong, they were not there on their own nickel. They were on there because they were ordered to go there by the United States government. Then I started having issues with guilt because I felt I hadn't done enough. As the war went on, I just felt I hadn't done enough. I felt guilt, what we call survivor guilt, and I could live with it, but it was grinding on me. Almost went back in right after I finished law school. Almost went back in the Marine Corps. Decided not to do that. I never really dealt with all that very well until I realized that it wasn't guilt so much. It was shame. It wasn't guilt that I didn't do my part. It was shame. It wasn't survivor guilt that I had. It was shame. And then finally, with the help of my wife and some other people, I was able to get through 90-something% of it. You never get through it all. I went on my practice of law without worrying about any of that too much. Then about 5 years ago, I found out about courts that were called veterans courts that were being held in a lot of places in the country, even a couple in Florida. And I found out that there was a a statute pending to enable the senior judge in each circuit to establish a veterans court. And so I got my firm to lobby on a pro bono basis that particular statute. Lo and behold, it got passed, but the reason it got passed was there were no funds with it. So then I lobbied with the help of someone else, and we had some meetings with the chief judge. I had the backing of the VA, the big-time backing of the VA with the chief judge. And then we had the state attorney and the public defender in there with us. And Brian Nelson was the other guy that made that was very helpful. He was one of the members of the House of Representatives who was the sponsors of that bill. So after a few meetings, I mean, the judge was totally against it because it had no money. It was just another burden on the system. Had no money with it. Finally, he started. He started with a judge, with a judge, and it wasn't until we got some money that we could hire a case manager. And Senator David Simmons was important in doing that and getting us $200,000 on a recurring basis. With that money, we could hire a case manager, and then we had the support of the VA and all the rest of the staff down there. And everybody was great. I mean, probation, corrections, you name it. It took a lot, and not to mention the judge, it took a lot of cooperation to make it work. And now it's off and running. It's doing very, very well. And then after I also started a veterans court not a veterans court, but a veterans committee in the Orange County Bar Association. That led us to set up what we call a pro bono clinic, and that's grown now to where 3 times a week we go out to the VA to represent, to interview veterans who have not necessarily criminal issues, not criminal issues at all. We just do civil and legal issues. Then I got asked to chair an organization that's a Veterans Help Organization started by United Way. Veterans call 211, which is the United Way's social service number, and they get directed to Mission United, and we help them get jobs, we help them with legal issues, we help them with a number of things. And we've been doing this now. We launched it this June. It'll be 2 years since we launched it. Through doing pro bono, through the work I've done with the Veterans Court, and through that work I've done with homeless, including going out there and interviewed homeless on the street, I've learned an awful lot about veterans. Okay, what we've got is a system that is interesting, because what you've got is, for years we didn't do enough for American veterans. Not that we're still doing some of all the things we ought to be doing, okay, but what we've got is across the board are issues that aren't being well met. Okay, what we have problems with in my organization is I don't know how to say it without being critical, but basically you've got organizations, you've got big employers who want to hire veterans, who don't know really how to do it, want to hire veterans maybe out of a sense of obligation, maybe a sense of guilt, and don't hire that well, don't line up veterans with the job that they ought to have, don't line up veterans in positions that they can grow in and have a career. Okay, and that doesn't help the veteran, it doesn't help the company. What you've got, frankly, is a lot of agencies out there that help veterans, okay, but they don't really work well among themselves. So that's why we started Mission United. So they could call Mission United, and we could send, we knew which agency could serve them best, and we sent them to that agency. That's the premise of how Mission United works. When we rolled out Mission United, we had a breakfast event with different tables, and at each table we had a veteran to tell that veteran's story. And at our table, there was a veteran named Bobby Withers, and he had lost, he had several wounds, but he had lost his right leg, right lower leg, and he had a prosthetic. And he was telling his story. He was telling about his first mission in Afghanistan, and it was pretty hairy. And he was, he made it back in one piece, and life was good. But he volunteered. He volunteered for a second mission, for a second deployment. And one of the women at our table asked, "Why would you volunteer after you'd gone through all you'd gone through?" And he said, this is word for word what he said: "The brotherhood, the sisterhood, the mission, and the adrenaline." Now this is the mindset of somebody who needs to integrate into civilian society. How is somebody, from a unit, military unit, with a high degree of camaraderie, a commitment to each other, and a commitment to the mission, and knowing and feeling that the mission is important, how are they going to translate? How are they going to transfer into the civilian world? What kind of job are they going to get that's important? How are they going to live without that sense of excitement that they had? How are they going to live without that sense of teamwork that they're used to? It's a big transition. A lot of them view it as simply every man for himself. Now, that's what it looks like to a lot of these folks. The reintegration, from that military society to the civilian society is extremely important, and it's something that's not just one person or one individual or one group of people's responsibility. It's all our responsibility to try to understand what that person went through and try to help them, like I say, reintegrate, whether it's in the job, no matter whether it's in school, no matter what. That's my experience. We're working on it at Mission United. We're working on it all the time. We feel like we're getting better all the time. We see some more and more challenges all the time. But it's something we all need to work at. We all need to try to help. And like, for example, we've got some of our employees, Lockheed, for example, Disney for another, that's trying to help other companies understand better how to hire veterans. Not that it's impossible, but it's important to line. It's important how you go about it. That you give people like I said, you give people a career path, and you get people in situations that work for them and also work for the company, because that's what it's all about. If it doesn't work for the employee, it's not going to work for the employer either, and vice versa.